that is mixed at best. The World Bank, despite calls not to do so, continues to be a major sponsor of oil extraction and coal extraction projects, and as some of my writing points out, a sponsor of those projects in ways that actually don't lead to good development outcomes, such as the Chad-Cameroon oil pipeline project. So I wish I had a good answer for how to weight these things, because I do believe that poverty alleviation is a noble goal, that people should have access to clean water, should have access to better health care, should be an environment should be created around them such that they can live longer lives. But I understand that insofar as those things follow from economic growth, and insofar as economic growth is related to industrial production, that we risk making a worse future for all of us by encouraging economic growth to the extent that China has undertaken it, to the extent that India is undertaking it. So I don't know how to balance those things. I don't have the compact answer. It's something I would say I need to do more thinking about, and that we in general need to do more thinking about. The attempts to deal with those things within the development industry under the guise of sustainable development, the thinking there has not been terrifically clear. The easy solutions have not been apparent. So I wish I could give you something concrete that I thought was the way to go. I do think that channeling development dollars into alternative energy projects and renewable energy projects, and to get them out of fossil fuel projects, is the way to go. But I'm also sympathetic to the idea that there are poor countries in the world with poor people in them that are trying to improve the lives of those people, and that one of the ways, or the main way to do that, is by growing economically in a way that has happened over the course of the 20th century, that did happen over the course of the 20th century.
Thanks for your talk. One thing that I wanted to hear your thoughts about, we talk about no consensus and these 3 points. How do you see, or do you see, the rise of these middle-income countries or BRIC countries, or whatever you want to call them, doing to the aid world in the near to intermediate term? And do you see, to follow up with that, this is sort of a second question, a return to a geopolitical, strategic-based aid world in a more multipolar environment?
Sure. So for the first thing to point out is from that slide that early on I put up about how many donors emerged during the 1950s. And that pattern hasn't changed. As every country becomes capable of being an aid donor, they become an aid donor. So South Korea becomes an aid donor as soon as its level of wealth is such that it has money to send to other countries. A lot is said about China as a donor, and then Brazil as a donor, so on and so forth. It creates more competition, and particularly where China is concerned, although the results are out on this because we don't have very good data about Chinese aid flows, and we have some conceptual issues with distinguishing Chinese aid flows from just pure Chinese investment, and how do we draw the line between those things. But without a doubt, China's influence in Africa has created a more competitive environment for Western donors. I don't know if we know the impacts of that yet, but one possibility is that insofar as Western donors want to take a harder stand on environmental issues, they can't, because the Chinese outside option is there. You're not going to give us the money? We have another source of funding, and that's in fact about the Chad-Cameroon oil pipeline project. That's one of the things that we cite as having played out over time, that the World Bank tried to take a hard stand against Chad about how it was spending its oil revenues, and Chad said, well, the Chinese National Oil Company would be willing to partner with us if you guys aren't interested, and that led to the World Bank backing down. So the hope is that these new donors simply provide more opportunities for useful financing in the developing world, I think that it's helpful to get new perspectives, that countries that have walked their own developmental trajectories that are very different from those of the United States and the United Kingdom might bring new ideas to development. But I also think that there are some dangers to this new competition. And then I'm not really sure what to say about the geopolitical consequences. I mean, one thing with the BRIC countries is that we've not seen a conclusion of the Doha round of trade negotiations, which were supposed to be the development round of negotiations within the WTO. And one of the reasons why we haven't seen that conclusion is because what was being offered by the rich countries, the developed countries of the world, was not sufficiently developmental for the middle income countries and probably not for the poor countries of the world either. But then that leaves us without an agreement on this. So those types of dynamics, I think, will become increasingly frequent as Brazil, as China continue to assert themselves. But is what's good for Brazil and China what's good for South Sudan and Ethiopia? I'm not sure. Those are very different economies, and Brazil and China increasingly have interests that are more aligned with the wealthy countries of the world and less aligned with sub-Saharan African countries. So even so far as Brazil and China and India can throw their weight around, it's not clear that that leads to the best developmental outcomes where we're having the hardest time achieving developmental outcomes.
I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and again encourage you to join us in future weeks. If you would like to get announcements about Friday Forum lectures, there's a sign up outside at the welcome table, as well as brochures. You're welcome to take one. And please join me one more time in thanking our speaker.